Moses would be in between Abraham and David, but David is the best king. What happens 14 generations after David?
Jesus.
No. No, because it's a low point. Jesus is a high point.
Wasn't that the Babylonian exile?
Yes. The Babylonian exile, right? What this is that when Babylon conquered Judah, David's dynasty finally fell. After David, there was obviously a series of kings, in his lineage following David in Judah. When the Babylonians conquered, they ended the Davidic lineage and the Davidic throne. All right, now, so there are 14 generations up to this high point, 14 generations down to the low point of the Babylonian exile. And how long is the next leg?
14 years.
Well, it's really 13, right? Because who is the 14th? 14 plus 1 will be with Jesus. Jesus will be the 14th generation. Now, if we go from starting point to high point to low point, what's the next point going to be? No, high. Starting point to a high point to a low point and then back up to a high point, right? With Jesus, we come to a high point. You know that Jesus is going to be a spectacular guy like David because history runs in these cycles. He's going to be the 14th one. He's going to be like David. Now, Ehrman points out that you can cross-check the genealogy with what it says in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures, and does it match up? What does Ehrman say? We'll look at page 78. The right-hand column on 78, the last two lines. Unfortunately, when the sequence is checked against the source, there do appear to be some problems. The most glaring one comes from verse 8, where Joram is said to be the father of Uzziah. For we know from 1 Chronicles that Joram was not Uzziah's father, but his great-great-grandfather. All right? So we can compare. Why would Matthew redact the genealogy in Chronicles this way? Pretty straightforward, but why would he redact? Why would he edit the chronology or the genealogy in this manner? Why would he cut names out?
That much.
What's that?
It wasn't. There were two different ones. It wasn't clear. So it would be every 14.
Right. It's so it can be 14, right? If we added in the extra names that are there, it doesn't have that 14, 14, 14 symmetry. He's got to cut names out to make it fit so it's symmetrical. So, when we ask that question, we're doing redaction criticism. Why would he edit out some of the names? Well, because he wanted to make it the 14 generations, where Jesus is going to be the next 14th. Dana, you look confused. Is there...
Well, wouldn't they leave out names? Because
Yeah, that's what Ehrman's saying happened. The author of the Gospel of Matthew left out some of the names that are in Chronicles to make it fit this scheme.
okay.
I mean, it's like, I don't know, how many people are in this classroom? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, right? It would be like me saying, I want everybody to be in groups of 3. If I ask for groups of 3, what's going to happen? Right? There's going to be an odd number, an odd set with only 2 groups. Well, I can just take 2 people and kick you out of the room. Right? That's what Matthew is doing. right? He's taking those names that don't fit the 14 scheme and kicking them out because he wants that nice symmetry of the groups.
Okay, I see, okay, I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Luke, by contrast, might leave in some of those names because Luke isn't concerned with setting up the 14-14 symmetry. Luke doesn't care about that. Why might his be different? Why would he redact it differently? Because his concerns are different than Matthew's concerns. Insofar as Matthew wants to depict Jesus as the son of David and have this schema, that's why he would redact it that way. Now, Ehrman also points out that what is in Matthew's genealogy, which is not normally in genealogies of this sort, other than the 14-14 schema. He says there's something in this genealogy that's not normally in genealogies of this sort.
Is Jewishness?
No. Look on page 81. There are women in the genealogy. Normally these genealogies don't include women because if you're going to determine who the next king is, you're tracking the male line, right? You're ignoring the female line. The female line is completely irrelevant in these patriarchal societies. Why would Matthew include this? Is it because he's a feminist? No, he's not a feminist. He's not including women because he thinks women are important. What does Ehrman say about why he might include the women? We'll look here on page 81. The box, and look on the right. Number 2 on the right. All 4 women that are on this genealogy were involved in sexual activities that were viewed as scandalous by outsiders, but that furthered the purposes of God. Now, why would you include women with scandalous sexual histories in the genealogy if you're the author of Matthew? Isn't that the sort of thing you would want to hide? Why would you add it in? Right. Jesus is kind of like a bastard child. Because is Joseph Jesus' real father? According to the story, no. Jesus conceived through God, not through Joseph. So there's some like sexual things going on here that outsiders might be like, hey, that sounds a little fishy. And some people have suggested that that Jesus was actually a bastard child, and that Joseph, that the story was made up about the Holy Spirit impregnating Jesus in order to explain that he's a legitimate bastard, so to speak. Whether or not you accept that, the point is that it's a story that's like, whoa, wait, Jesus, is he a legitimate son or not? Because there's some like sexually weird stuff going on here, since Mary's being impregnated by a divine being. Well, Matthew throws these women in the story and says, well, that's pretty normal for the history of Judaism. We've got all these stories about other women who are in sexually questionable situations that, in the end, they're the good guys and they serve God. Let's just look at one here.